The most dangerous crisis inside a government is never the one happening in the streets. It's the one happening behind closed doors, quietly rewriting boundaries while the public is distracted. And when Representative Grace Meng looked Attorney General Pam Bondi in the eye and said, "Your department is breaking federal law," the entire room understood instantly that the real emergency wasn't happening at the border or in the courts or in some international conflict. It was happening inside the Department of Justice itself. And the moment you start lining up the details, the pattern becomes darker, stranger, and far more deliberate than anyone expected. The hearing began quietly, but the calm didn't last long.
Supported local groups working to increase hate crimes reporting, give community members resources in languages other than English, and to improve relationships between local law enforcement and the community. It was a direct response to the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. You may recall in March 2021, 6 women of Asian descent were tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. My Hate Crimes Act passed through Congress in May of that year with bipartisan support, including from several of my colleagues on the other side of the dais. For years, I've been hearing from constituents about how scared they felt and have been hearing from members of these communities as well as experts who've told me that one of the best ways to combat hate in this country is to fund prevention programs. So not just prosecution, but also prevention. I have a letter here that hate crime survivors and family members wrote to you in May, expressing their strongest concerns about the termination of these grants. Signed by people like family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I asked unanimous consent to enter into the hearing record this letter from these survivors and family members to Attorney General Bondi regarding the termination of hate crimes-related grant programs.
Without objection.
Oh, yes, without objection.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, I absolutely share your support for our law enforcement and for the prosecution of hate crimes in a just way, but we must combat all forms of hate on all fronts, bringing together law enforcement and community leaders and members of the public. And these grant programs have helped many communities do exactly this. So I just wanted to ask and hear from you why there is a proposal to eliminate the 3 largest sources of DOJ funding for hate crime prevention programs.
Yeah, and Ranking Member, can you list those 3 for me again? And I'm sorry, I have not received your letter yet, but I would welcome working with you on any issue regarding hate crimes in the Asian American community, in any community. I welcome working with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to, and this letter was sent May 15th, and we'll make sure that you and your team have received it. So the programs, one of them, for example, is named the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice. 3 programs have been cut, and one of these programs literally help support our law enforcement departments locally, like our NYPD, to train and respond to hate crimes.
Let me see. So we have 5,800 grants, Chairman, that come, Ranking Member, excuse me, that come through my office. 365 have been cut so far. That's approximately 6%. What I will tell you is we have turned back on 13 of those so far because people have reached out to me. If you want to reach out and talk to me directly, I will give you my cell phone. I would love to sit down with you and see if we can work that out. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with those 3 directly. But again, we will, if you have on either side of the aisle any grants that you believe should be back on, I would love to meet with you and work with you on that. We're doing that on a case-by-case basis, and law enforcement is my top priority, especially hate crimes, violence against women, everything I've done my entire career as a prosecutor. I think we have a former prosecutor in the room too, and I look forward to working with you on those and seeing what we can do to help you.
Great, we'd love to work together, and we will flag all the programs that have been impacted, including those that directly support our local law enforcement like NYPD. And just to be more specific, the three programs mentioned are community-based approaches, Jabara Hire, No Hate, and Shepherd Bird, No Hate Shepherd Bird. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Within minutes, Grace Meng shifted from routine commentary to what felt like a comprehensive indictment of how Pam Bondi's DOJ was operating. Not sloppy, not chaotic, not mismanaged. Something worse, something intentional. What caught people off guard wasn't just the tone she used. It was the precision of every accusation she laid out, each one stacking on top of the last like pieces of a puzzle that no one wanted to see completed. The first red flag was enormous. Billions of dollars in congressionally approved funding simply never arrived. Money that Congress had allocated. Money legally required to be released. Money intended for law enforcement, crime reduction programs, violence prevention, and community safety. Grace Meng didn't speak about it like a misunderstanding. She spoke about it as a direct violation carried out under the leadership of Pam Bondi. These weren't hypothetical funds or future projects. They were grants already awarded. Local agencies had planned their budgets around them. Cities were counting on them, and the DOJ withheld them anyway. Some analysts have suggested online that this wasn't an oversight at all. Rumors circulate that it may have been a quiet attempt to starve programs the administration didn't want to support without publicly admitting it. Whether that's true or not is still unclear, but one thing isn't. When the Justice Department chooses to ignore laws that Congress has already passed, you're no longer dealing with policy disputes. You're dealing with a breakdown in the legal system itself, a breakdown happening while Pam Bondi sits at the top of the department responsible for enforcing those very laws. But withholding money was only the opening move. Grace Meng then transitioned into something even more alarming: transparency laws. Specifically, the requirement that the Office of Management and Budget publish apportionments so the public can see how agencies spend taxpayer money. These documents are not optional. They are fundamental to accountability. They reveal how funds are used, where money flows, and whether agencies are following the law. Yet under Pam Bondi's DOJ, Meng says those reports simply weren't published. Not partially, not late, not inconsistent. They just didn't appear. And when transparency disappears, accountability disappears with it. Some analysts believe this was due to internal disputes. Others whisper about intentional concealment. But whichever explanation you believe, one thing stands out. Nothing good happens when the government hides how it spends billions of dollars. Then came the revelation that made the entire hearing shift. Grace Meng stated that Pam Bondi's DOJ had begun restoring gun rights to individuals who were legally prohibited from owning any firearms, including convicted felons and domestic abusers. In normal circumstances, this can only happen through a rigid legal process with layers of oversight. But Meng alleged it was being done illegally, without proper review, without background checks. And at the same time, the DOJ was allowing the sale of forced reset trigger devices that can turn a standard firearm into something resembling a machine gun. In a country already haunted by mass shootings, this wasn't just a legal issue. It was a public safety emergency. Critics online questioned whether this was the result of leadership pressure, internal confusion, or a deliberate softening of rules under Pam Bondi. No one knew for sure, but the implications were alarming. And then Meng reached the part that stunned the room. More than 1,500 individuals involved in the Capitol attack were pardoned or had their sentences reduced. Again, this wasn't presented as a political disagreement. Grace Meng framed it as a warning. The new pardon attorney chosen under the DOJ had previously raised money to defend some of the most violent participants. That connection alone raised serious conflict of interest concerns. Pardons are supposed to restore justice, not reward loyalty. Some of the pardoned individuals went on to commit new crimes. And while that doesn't prove motive, the pattern spoke for itself. It didn't look like a justice process. It looked like a loyalty system, one operating under the supervision of Pam Bondi. But the moment that set off the strongest reaction came next: the luxury jet from Qatar. A jet valued in the hundreds of millions. A jet that reports say was accepted by the United States and approved by Pam Bondi's DOJ, raising serious questions about the constitutional clause that prohibits foreign governments from giving gifts to U.S. officials. That clause exists for one reason: to prevent foreign influence. Influence doesn't always come in the form of money. Sometimes it comes in the form of access, favors, or lavish benefits that create expectations. Rumors online claimed there were internal warnings that were ignored. Others said the decision blindsided parts of the department. But regardless of the version, nothing about that situation should have happened quietly. And yet it did, under the watch of Attorney General Pam Bondi. From there, the hearing shifted into a new level of intensity. Grace Meng accused the administration of issuing illegal executive orders and targeting political critics through weaponized investigations. The case of Miles Taylor was highlighted as an example. If true, this meant the DOJ was being used as a political enforcement tool, a dangerous sign of institutional capture. The point Meng hammered repeatedly was clear. Justice cannot exist when investigations are guided by loyalty instead of law. And in her view, under Pam Bondi, that line had been crossed. But even that wasn't the most disturbing part. Grace Meng described how crucial internal units were being dismantled under Bondi's leadership. The Public Integrity Section, the division responsible for prosecuting government corruption, weakened. Task Force Kleptocapture, designed to enforce sanctions against Russian oligarchs, dismantled. The FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force, responsible for defending against hostile operations, shut down entirely, and dozens of experienced prosecutors, career litigators, and FBI leaders were pushed out or fired. These weren't junior staffers. They were some of the most knowledgeable experts in national security, corruption cases, and counterintelligence. Their removal under Pam Bondi left the DOJ hollowed out, operating with fewer guardrails, less oversight, and more room for quiet manipulation. Then came the budget, the final piece of the pattern. Under the DOJ's proposed 2026 budget, funding was slashed across nearly every area that fights crime or protects vulnerable communities. Cuts to the FBI, cuts to the DEA, cuts to anti-trafficking programs, cuts to initiatives fighting fentanyl, cuts to sexual assault service grants, cuts to violence against women programs. Entire hate crime initiatives removed at the exact moment hate crimes were reaching historic highs, and the Community Relations Service, created by the Civil Rights Act to prevent racial conflict, eliminated entirely. Every cut weakened the institutions meant to keep the country safe. Every reduction diminished oversight. Every shift created more room for unchecked power, all under the leadership of Pam Bondi. By the end of the hearing, Grace Meng's message wasn't subtle. She wasn't describing incompetence. She wasn't describing policy differences. She was describing a system being redirected, intentionally, from equality under the law to loyalty under leadership. A Justice Department acting as though laws were optional. A pattern of decisions that, when combined, paint a picture far more alarming than any single scandal. Because when you line up the withheld funding, the missing transparency records, the restored gun rights, the mass pardons, the foreign jet, the targeted investigations, the dismantled national security units, the forced-out experts, and the gutted budget, the pattern is unavoidable. This isn't a department losing control, that it's a department being redesigned, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really happening behind these hearings, the hidden patterns, the moves no one explains on TV, the deeper implications behind Grace Meng's confrontation with Pam Bondi. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment on which part shocked you the most. And tell me what hearing or witness you want exposed next, because the next story is even bigger.